I think it's a relatively safe thing to say that for the most part Ninjago is a fairly well received show. I would say the community as a whole is typically in a state of content regardless of whether or not the seasons are good or bad. It is very rare to actually see Ninjago to get into a full state of controversy, and there are a lot of them that have happened over the course of the years. But the thing is that some of them specifically have certainly been very interesting topics for debate, and some of them have also been stupid. But the thing is that it is very interesting to document how people were feeling at the time, and how people will conceive those controversies a lot later down the line. So I have gathered for this video 5 Ninjago controversies, ones over the course of the years which have varying states of my own opinion on. Some of them I still do understand to this very day, and some of them I just consider straight up stupid. But the thing is that I want to gauge the opinion on the Ninjago community today, see how people feel about the current day affairs, and see how people overall take to these topics at hand. So, before anything else, make sure you keep your opinions in the comments down below, and also keep it civil, but I am very curious to know what everyone thinks. So, let's get into it and discuss some Ninjago controversy. I'm going to start from the one that I believe caused the less controversy and go to the one that I believe causes the most. The first one is coming from just a general sense of vague canonicity in any sort of external media. There are very common debates amongst Ninjago fans whether or not certain games or certain comics or certain anything is actually related to the show. What doesn't help is that a lot of these different pieces of media, typically speaking, do have a lot of canonicity to them, but they take certain liberties that just simply don't really allow for them to remain within Ninjago's canon. There are explanations for a lot of them, the most common one being Shadow of Ronin. The thing is that Shadow of Ronin does play fairly well within Ninjago, and seemingly was also referenced within Possession. But the thing is that there are certain things within the game that just simply do not make sense within the show itself, such as the Elemental Forges, the Ultra Dragon, all of those little elements that really do play a factor within the actual show's canonicity. And there are some decent explanations as to explaining why something like Shadow Ronin could be canon. My main personal theory is just simply down to the fact that the non-canon elements actually come from Jay's depiction of the story. Remember, the game ends with Jay just telling the story of Shadow of Ronin. So the thing is that you could put anything that's not canon down to Jay's interpretation. But again, that is very loose and has not been confirmed. But the thing is that there are so many other things you'd have to apply this to, and it definitely does become quite messy. But the controversy just simply comes from the fact that a lot of people just say to discount those elements, just to say that they come down to what they decided to do within that external media, and that you shouldn't think too far into it and just accept anything as canon. But simply put, I just really don't think that makes any sense. And the Ninjago timeline, which has been very well articulated and very sensitive to input new events into, has definitely become one of those things that you just can't really mess with and play loosely with. So, as it stands, I honestly just remain on the side of, unless there's a definitive explanation as to how it could be canon, you kind of just have to consider to not be, because that's the easiest way to go about it and leads to the least amount of headaches. But for the first one, I would love to know what you guys think of it. The second controversy I want to bring up today is actually coming from something that has been quite consistent over the course of the years, and especially within recent time, and it's the whole concept of Zane faking out when it does come to his death. Of course, we've had a lot of these over the years, and it's certainly become a very controversial aspect of the show itself. This all stems out from the initial moment in Season 3 where Zane makes the ultimate sacrifice. It is a very powerful moment and definitely one of the most memorable and one of the most popular scenes within the show. But obviously in the end, Zane does come back. But the thing is that since that point in time, we have had many instances where Zane has had something that is akin to a fake out death. They typically have some sort of allusion to Zane being damaged beyond the point of no return, but ultimately it still ends up coming back. And this has certainly been a big problem for a lot of Ninjago fans. The main weight of this whole controversy comes from people who argue that all of these moments of Zane faking out is just completely watering down that initial moment. It makes it not as special, it makes it not as powerful, because it's something that we get to see basically every other season. The thing is that I do understand this, because not only is it a fake out of the original moment, the thing is that it also does take elements from the original moment as well, such as the score. The theme of the Titanium Ninja is constantly used within these fake outs, and I do think that is the biggest problem above all else. It certainly just feels like it's trying to emulate that initial moment and trying to have that more popular Zayn moment that a lot of people are craving. The thing is that it is just a very cheap way of trying to get this whole feeling back. And I do understand it for the most part, because the thing is that it does continue to happen again, like I said, to this very day. As recent as Dragon's Rise in Season 3, we have had a Zayn fake out. And that doesn't even go to show how we had one in Crystallize, and we had one even again before that. The thing is that there are many of them within the course of the show, and they just keep doing it basically for no reason, and it's honestly becoming very annoying, and I do honestly understand where it's coming from. If there was some sort of stake, some sort of weight, some sort of consequence to these things, I honestly wouldn't mind it. But it's a very consistent, Zayn gets damaged, Zayn has this emotional beat, Zayn gets rescued in some capacity, Zayn is completely back to normal. It just feels kind of wrong, and I really am starting to get sick of it myself. So again, I would like to know what you guys think of it. Do you guys like the Zayn fake outs? Do you think that they're really bad? I would like to know where you sit on it, because it does feel like it's becoming a fairly consistent issue, and I'm definitely starting to see the problem with it. Controversy 3 actually does come from a very specific character from a very specific season, and I'm not going to talk about Crystallize today because that is worthy of its whole own video, but I am going to talk about Harumi, because Harumi has been by far one of the biggest controversies within recent time when it comes to Ninjago. Her coming back essentially from the dead is being certainly something of wide debate. You have people on both sides, and it's honestly something that has still been going for a fair few years now. Harumi, of course, returned in Crystallize, and it has certainly been a very widespread controversy because of everything that happened within the Oni trilogy. Of course, she met her demise within the Oni trilogy by falling through a building, but the thing is that her return has certainly caused two sides to form. You have got one side of the argument, people who say that her arc was perfect within the Oni trilogy, a incredibly flawed character receiving a end where she felt the own consequence of her actions felt extremely good, and she shouldn't have returned because she was done from that point onwards. But of course, then you have the other side of the argument, people who are happy that she returned because she did have a chance of redemption, and I feel like just saying that is going to have a lot of people making a lot of very interesting comments. But the thing is that is the argument. People who wanted to see her make some sort of redemption, reconcile with Lloyd, and have something truly come from her. So the two sides being fairly certain on where they stand when it comes to the character. But it has certainly been a never-ending cycle of people deciding whether or not they're truly happy with Harumi's return. Of course, she has also not returned in Dragon's Rising as of the end of Season 3. So it's a case of she's returned for this one season, and who knows if we ever actually see her again. But this controversy could honestly be a part of the fact that she hasn't. There's been a lot of debate as to whether or not Harumi existing within Ninjago once more is actually a good decision. And it does come to one big thing, being where do I stand on it? Now, I have made a two-parter when it does come to Harumi, and if you haven't checked that out, I would definitely recommend you do so. The thing is that the second part of that analysis, I was definitely juggling whether or not I'm actually happy with the fact that Harumi returned. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm still not fully decided. Honestly, I really do understand both sides of the spectrum. Not to call myself a fence-sitter, but I really understand why people want a redemption, but I also understand why people feel almost like they're being psyched out of a really good arc from the Oni trilogy. It is a very difficult topic. But as it stands, if she isn't going to re-return in Dragon's Rising, I would stand on the fact that she shouldn't have returned. If they had brought her back just for that one season and they never do anything again with her, I will be completely on board with the fact that she shouldn't have returned. But if they do commit to the character and they do something with her, I will be very excited to see it. But it definitely does come down to whether or not LEGO are willing to commit to that controversy, whether or not they're willing to re-dip their toes in the character. Honestly, I really don't know what they will do, and I'm definitely curious as to what they will do, but as it stands, I definitely do see the side of, I kind of wish she didn't return, and that just simply comes down to the fact they haven't given her the time. But ultimately speaking, there is a chance that I do change my mind on that. But again, that is definitely one I'd like to hear your thoughts on. But this does bring us to the second to last controversy for the video, and this one has certainly been a more interesting one that I am very curious to hear you guys' thoughts on, because we are officially past the point of this whole era when it does come to Ninjago. But it does still cause a lot of conversation, which is the 11-minute era, and more specifically, just the fact that the episodes themselves were 11 minutes. I want you to track your mind back to 2019, where you were just done with the Oni trilogy and we were getting information about this new era of Ninjago. And the thing is that it was revealed that the episodes themselves were going to be 11 minutes. Now this caused absolute pandemonium within the Ninjago community. The thing is that there were a lot of people who were not best pleased with the fact that they were converting the episodes. Cutting them directly down the middle was something that a lot of people were extremely worried about, and there were definitely a lot of growing pains when it does come to these episodes. But the thing is that I do think towards the end of it, Ninjago did kind of get into its own when it did come to the format. Of course they do eventually go back to 22 minutes, and that's another thing in of itself, because I believe people were very interested in the fact that they were going back to it. But the thing is that to this very day, a lot of people don't like the 11-minute format. One of the biggest things that people said about this era is the fact that 11-minute episodes completely got in the way of character development, got in the way of emotional moments, got in the way of plot points, got in the way of a lot of different aspects of Ninjago that was certainly expanded on in a better way when the episodes were 22 minutes long. And the thing is that I do understand these points, but I also don't. The interesting thing about the 11-minute era is that we were actually, by technicality, getting more content. If you look at it in the most binary sense possible, 2 11-minute era episodes equal to 1 episode from Dragon's Rising or from the classic era. And then you look at, for example, season 11 or Crystallize with 30 episodes. That's the equivalent of 15 episodes per season. And I do think a lot of people don't realize that by all account we did have a lot more time. Of course it is handled differently because of the difference in pacing, and I do think that was a massive problem. But again, like I said, and again in terms of character development, I really do think towards the end, they were definitely getting good at it. I think of Cole's development from Master of the Mountain, or Nia's development from Seabound, and I think that they honestly did really well with the timings, and I don't think the 11-minute format truly got in the way. The other thing as well is that 11 minutes per episode, in my opinion, definitely actually made Ninjago a lot more consumable. It was definitely a lot easier to put on an episode of Ninjago because of the time feeling shorter. It was certainly a good way to actually consume Ninjago as well. And again, you can attribute this to, oh well, it's not really much different if you truly look at it, but the thing is that it did truly just feel a lot more bingeable. It did feel so much more accessible, and I did kind of like that. Am I happy that Ninjago is back to the 22-minute era? Yes, because Dragon's Rising could not have functioned on 11 minutes. But I really don't think it takes away from how good the 11-minute era truly did feel. Like I said, you can talk about the quality of the seasons, and that is a different topic itself. But I really don't think 11 minutes an episode was truly that bad. I'm very curious to know if there's anyone who is still adamantly against the 11-minute format. Honestly, it would be cool to see how people do feel about it, because I would like to see the other side of the argument. But ultimately speaking, I really don't think it was that much of a bad thing, and it definitely was some benefit. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I really can't see those seasons being in the 22-minute formats. I really don't think it could really function in that sense, but maybe that's because of how it released. But that was the second to last controversy, and let's get into the biggest one that we've ever had. And the biggest controversy we've ever seen within Ninjago, and I feel like you know exactly what I'm about to say, is of course the redesigns. The redesigns came out just after the movie because it was the designs from the movie, and the reception from the movie was honestly debatable at best, but it was discovered that from that point onwards, we were getting those designs within the show, and Ninjago fans, or at least a good percentage of them, were not happy whatsoever. People were completely against the designs making their way into the show, and people were worried that it was going to have further implications, such as the voice actors, the animation style. There was a lot of things put into question with the addition of these designs. But the thing is that, simply put, that was the only thing that necessarily changed. And to this very day, it does feel like there is a lot of people who are still not happy with that decision. Of course, then you realize that these designs have now been around for 9 years. And honestly, it does kind of blow my mind that people still have a problem with this. These designs now have officially been around for longer than the original designs. They've been in the show for longer than those ones have ever been. And I do think that's something that not a lot of people truly realize. These designs have been around for ages. So the fact that there is still people to this very day who comment on the fact that these designs are around kind of just blows my mind. I really don't see any problem with it, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, I really also don't understand referring to them as the new designs anymore. Like I said, they've been around for so long, they're just the designs. I often refer to the pre-Season 8 designs now as just the legacy designs, or the classic designs, because that's just how they truly feel. The ones that we have now, the ones from the movie, are the de facto designs for the ninja, but it feels like to this very day, there's just some people who just can't really see that. And I would be curious to know as to why, apart from the fact that you just prefer the older seasons. Is there a true reason as to why you think these designs shouldn't have been within the show? I would love to know, but again, if it's not just I prefer season 1 through 7. But like I said, that is the last controversy of the bunch, and certainly the biggest of them, but also the one I have the least to say, because it feels like it's the most cut and dry. But I feel like I can't talk about controversies without bringing that one up. But this is where I'm going to officially pass it off to you guys. What do you think of the controversies that I've talked about today? And also, what is the most notable controversy that you've ever seen within the show? Are there any that stick out to you? Are there any that I haven't brought up today that you feel like I should have talked about within the video? If there are enough of them, I'm more than happy to make another one if you guys do want that. But I do want your opinion on the 5 that I've talked about today, and just your overall feelings towards them, because there are some interesting topics within them that I'd be curious to know what you guys think of. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching, and I do hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I just like talking about Ninjago with more people, and if you want to stick around, I would be honoured. And if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always consider becoming a channel member and joining the legends that you see on screen. A particular shout out to the Eternal Legend, Grandmaster Sensei 28208, for being the Eternal Legend. Thank you very much, my friend. But that's about it for today, you guys, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Okay, bye!